Begin the current Daf, Mesech Chagigah Daf Yomi. Begin 12 lines down at the top of the Yamin. We continue the theme of the previous Daf, discussing what we said in the Mishnah. Again, we brought in this Mishnah because one of the items was Chagigah, which is from the category of Mikra Mud V'Halachas Merubis. The Gemara continues on that theme about having very few psukim, but many halachas alluded to in a certain topic. Today's Daf. Something to discuss in today's Daf are we're going to Mitzvah complete Perek Kol Chayavin and begin Perek in Darshan, the second Perek Mesech Chagigah, and learn Daf Yomi. Sometimes we learn about is what we call Yeshlin Amashi Smaichu, the third category, that there are certain halachas that have sufficient sources in the Torah. For example, Hadinin, monetary laws such as Nefesh Tachas Nefesh, which that doesn't mean literally a life for a life, it means moment, it means regarding monetary law. Havoidis, the laws of Karbanis, such as the Hilocha L'Tafka Machal Kabbalah, that when the Torah refers to the receiving of the blood, it used the terminology of the transportation of the blood to tell you that that's also considered Mavodah. Tumas, the laws of purity and impurity, such as Mayim Shekol Gufay Oil Behen, the shear of how much a mikvah has to have, that's the amount of a person's body can be immersed at one time. And Arayas, the laws of illicit relationships, such as Bita Manasosai, the daughter from a woman other than one's wife. And in Darshan, then we begin the next paragraph regarding the prohibition to expound certain ideas, like about Arayas, Ma'aser Bereshis, Ma'aser Merkava, the vision of Yechezkel Navi, and among groups of a certain amount of people, depending on how many people you could give such a share to at one time. So we begin the current Daf Yud Aleph, 12 lines down at the top of the Aleph. So we said in the Mishnah, and we spoke about this category in the previous Daf, Shabbos and Chagiga and Me'ilah, that they're Mikra Mud V'Halachas Merubis, that there is a few psukim, but many halachas that we said is like mountains hanging from a thread. Now, similarly, not mentioned on Mishnah, but talking about in the Brisa, Negoyim va'olis. Negoyim is the laws of Negav Tzaras, and the olis is the laws of Tumah that could be transferred in through the medium of oil. Mikra Mud V'Halachas Merubis, the Tanna Brisa says there are also few psukim and many halachas. Says the Gemara, Negoyim Mikra Mud, Negoyim. How could you say Negoyim are few psukim? Negoyim Mikra Merubahu, Tazriya, Mitzayda, we all know these tons and tons of psukim talking about a Negav Tzaras. How are you calling Negoyim Mikra Mud? So that probably says, no, you're right. This is what the Brisa, you have to read the Brisa differently. Negoyim is actually the opposite. Mikra Meruba v'halachas mo'atis. Actually, there's not so many halachas regarding Negoyim, but there's many psukim about it. A holis, on the other hand, yes, that's Mikra Mud v'halachas merubas. The laws of Tumas Oil, very, very few psukim alluding to it in the Torah. And at many halachas, we have a Mesechta Zales, it's a huge Mesechta. It's very difficult, many halachas. So the Gemara says, okay, my nafka, what's the difference if it's many psukim or few psukim? So it says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. And that's what the Brisa was trying to contrast when I mentioned the Goyim Ba'olis. If you have a doubt regarding a halacha regarding the Goyim, ayin b'kroi. Open up a chumash. Look at the psukim. If you have a doubt regarding the idea regarding a tum of oil, ayin b'masnidin. Open up Mesechta Zales, Mesechtas Kalim, in all these different in Olis and Sefer Ta'aras, and you look in the Mishnah. That's why I'm saying that's what always say Negoyim Ba'olis. Negoyim is one way and Olis is another way. Negoyim is in psukim and Olis is in Mishnah. Now, going on to the third category, which we said Yesh le Namashi Smechu, even the Tana of our Mishnah, how there is what to rely on are the following ideas. Din, regarding monetary law. So interesting, the same words we had used to ask in the previous category, the Gemara asks here also. The Gemara says, what do you mean, Michtav Ksivin? They're written, they're very explicit. In other words, our Mishnah said, Yesh le Namashi Smechu, is what to rely on. Sounds like, but it's not explicit. Why do you say what's to rely on? We had asked on the previous category, you're saying it's Mikra Mud V'Halachas Merubah, we're saying it's written. Here we're also saying the same words written, but we're asking, because even this category is saying what to rely on, not just what to rely on. These are psukim that talk about the monetary law, all mishpatim, it talks about what happens if someone injures or whatever, and someone's a shimer, all these things are written. So you want to know, look at the Rabbi. In other words, but there are certain halachas that are not so explicit, like the one we're going to quote right now, and things like that is what to rely on, but it's not mefurish in the Torah. Like what? It's telling learn the Brisa. Rabbi Shloimy says, in Shmois, it says nefesh tachas nefesh, a life for a life, which is referring to, the pasuk says im osin yeh, if there's going to be an imglik, if there's going to be like a tragedy, that the woman is going to die, so then there's a life for a life. The Rebbe says what that means is mammon. What does that mean? He has to give money to compensate the value of the woman to her yershim, to her inheritance. That there is no death penalty. Because what happened was, this guy who killed her, if you look at the Pesukim over there, he wasn't trying to hurt the woman. He was actually fighting. There was a brawl, a big fight outside the bar, and this woman was walking by, and it says, these men were fighting, and he slams him, and the woman gets injured, this pregnant woman, and she dies. So Rebbe holds, if you intended to kill one person, took out a gun, he shoots, and the guy ducks, and there was a woman right behind her, and he kills someone else, you pater from Misa, and then you pay the monetary value of the person that was killed. Says Rebbe, do you really say it means money? Maybe it doesn't mean the monetary value of the person's soul. Maybe it literally means, say, a life for a life. You kill a person that killed another person. Says Rebbe, no. I'll tell you. Nemer Nesina Lamata. It says Nesina later down in the pasuk, when that we're discussing now, when it says V'nesat nefesh tachas nafesh, when the woman dies, it says you should give. It says the word Nesina of nefesh tachas nefesh. Now, Nemer Nesina Lamala, earlier in the psukim, when it's talking about, it was a pregnant woman. Now, she got injured. So the pasuk says, V'nasim b'flilim, that you're going to have to give the monetary value of the fetus. The woman was pregnant. There's a value to the pregnancy, and you have to give it with judges. Now, Malal Mama, just like over there, we know that you're not going to kill the guy who caused the miscarriage, but rather over there it's clear that he's going to have to give the monetary value. Avka Mama here also where it says the word Nesina, it also means money. So why say nefesh tachas nefesh? Nefesh means dimei ha-nefesh, the value of the person's life. So the Gemara is saying that when we said in the Mishnah that the halacha of a dinin is what to rely on, yeah, because there is a gzera shava, but it's not mefurish in the Torah. It's not explicit, not mechtab ksivin. It says nefesh tachas nefesh, which you would have entertained to say maybe, yeah, life for life. You killed a woman, we kill you. So no, it means dimei ha-nefesh, and we know that from gzera shava, from Benasan, where it says in that pasuk Benasan b'flilim, and when the sat nefesh tachas nefesh, just like over there, it means the monetary value. Here also means the monetary value. Next category we said in the Mishnah was avodas. Regarding the service in the Beis Hamikdash, that's something that there is what to rely on. So, what to rely on? The whole Sefer Vayikra. What are you talking about? They have psukim and psukim talking about karbanis with the pedadim, with the vadim. It's all over. So what do you mean? It's like what to rely on. So I said, right. When we said this, we meant illa, like for example, leilo chasadam, regarding the mitzvah of the avodah of transporting the blood, which is 4 primary avodas: the shchita, slaughtering the animal; kabbalah, receiving the blood; hoilacha, transporting the blood; and zrika, and spraying the blood. Those are the 4 primary avodas in karbanos. Everything else is secondary to that. Now that of hoilacha, that there is such a mitzvah, that's not mafurish in the pasuk. That's what to rely on. The time we learned the price, the pasuk says in the pasuk said vehikrivu. The pasuk is in Vayikra. It says that he's going to slaughter the young animal in front of Hashem, and vehikrivu, that the sons of Aaron the Kahanim are going to be makriv, the blood, and they're going to spray the blood. Now, although the word vehikrivu is a terminology of hoilacha, as we're going to explain, because it means to bring near, that's what hoilacha is, bringing the blood near, it actually only means the receiving of the blood, what's called kabbalah. The reason for this is right after the shchita, it says, v'shachat es ben ha-bakal fnei Hashem, v'kriva. Now, you can't bring blood near unless you first received it. So obviously, although it's saying the word v'kriva, it really means zu kabbalah sadam. It means receiving of the blood. Now, but the Torah is utilizing the wording of halacha, of transporting. Where do we find that the word v'kriva means transporting? If somebody says in the pasuk in Vayikra, later on, a few pasukim later, it says v'hikriv ha'kohen is hakol. The kohen is going to be makriv. Again, the word makriv means to bring near. As hakol, everything v'hikriv mizbech, and he's going to sacrifice it on the altar. Now, that pasuk is in the context of the ivarm, of the limbs, which besides the blood that you spray in the mizbech, you also take the limbs and you burn it on the mizbech. Now, because it says over there, the hakerev and the kedayim, yirchatz b'moyim, the intestines and the other parts are going to wash in water. V'hikriv ha'kohen is hakol. And the kohen is going to be makriv it all, v'hikriv mizbecha, and then he's going to burn it on the mizbech. Now, the master says, when that pasuk says v'hikriv, is zu halochas evam lekevesh. That's referring to transporting the limbs to the ramp, because as Rashi explains, if you would think that v'hikriv, like we always say, be makriv hakorban, makriv would mean to burn it, but that explicitly says a few words later v'hikriv mizbecha. So if hikter is to burn it, so obviously when you're saying before v'hikriv, that means to transport it. So wait a second. Okay, so I know the word vehikra means to transport. So then why by the Kabbalah Saddam, which I know vehikrivu over there has to mean Kabbalah because it was right after the slaughtering, so why does it use the terminology of halacha when it's talking about Kabbalah? Remember to tell you, the halacha leitavka mechal Kabbalah. That halacha will not be removed from the category of Kabbalah for all its halachas. Meaning, that even though technically halacha is an avodah that you could be mavatal, if you want to, you could slaughter right next to the mizbeach, receive it, and spray it. But you're right. But when you're not mavatlet and you slaughter it somewhere else, then it's not avodah. Now, what does that mean? It's not avodah. Meaning, if let's say the kohen who's doing halacha has a machshavas pigel, he's like, you know what? Let's eat this carbon beyond its time. That would create pigel. Also, the kohen who's doing halacha needs to be a kohen, needs to wear big dekuna. An einin, someone who's sitting, an oral would be invalid because it's an avodah. That is what we mean when we say that avodah is what to rely on, because it's not mefurish in the pasuk. It doesn't say anywhere about halacha. It says in the wording, it talks about Kabbalah, but the wording is the wording halacha to tell you halacha is avodah too. The next item we said in the Mishnah that is what to rely on is taharos. The laws of purification is what to rely on. So what to rely on? Mechlik Sivan, this mefurish psukim in the Torah, they talk about how a tummy person has to purify himself. So the Gemara says, yeah, but we only needed this. They were saying it's not mefurish ila shir mikvah, to the measurement of the mikvah. How much water has to be in the purifying bath? That doesn't say. Like Siva, it's not like in the Brisa. Pasuk b'yikra b'rochatz b'mayim, that he's going to wash in the water. Now, as Rashi points out, b'mayim is with a pasach. B'mayim, not b'mayim. It's b'mayim. Now, a pasach sounds like the waters, the designated waters. Which waters are you talking about? The main mikvah, with the gathered waters. What does that come to exclude? From drawn waters, what's called mayim she'uvim. Gathered waters means they gathered on its own, but you can't draw it. Now, mayim chayim, what's called live waters, like spring waters, that you don't need. Because from the fact that by a zav, there was a man who had certain discharges from his body, there it says mayim chayim, obviously other tmeim don't require mayim chayim. So what does it mean, b'mayim in the designated waters? Must mean what we call mikvah waters, which even though they're rain waters, they're not live waters, but they gathered on their own and they weren't drawn. Now, that's not the main one we want to say. And the pasuk continues that v'rachatz b'mayim es kol b'sarai, that he's going to wash in water his whole body. It's mayim shekol gufa ilman. It has to be the amount of water that a person's whole body could go into. What's the dimensions of a person, which Tais discusses here in many places. Is a person really 3 amas or 4 amas? But be that as it may, v'kamein, how much is it? It's amal amma. It's amma squared, so in the width and the breadth of a person, and it's berim shalosh amas with a height of 3 amas, which is around 6 feet, which makes sense if a person's dunking down into the waters. There would be enough water for a person to get his whole body in. B'shira chacham mikvah, the chacham evaluated. So how much does that come out to be in quantity? It's arbam sa. 40 sa would be enough water that a person's body could go into. That's where we get this halacha of a shiur of mikvah. That's not mefurish in the Torah. It just says that es kol b'sarai. Es kol b'sarai is how much water would need b'sarai. So we figure out the dimensions, and then that tells us the quantity. That's masha yismoichu, but that's not mefurish in the Torah. The next category that we said that's also not mefurish, but it's what's relying is tumas, the laws of impurity. We have all these psukim that talk about mitzayda and nega and zav and all the halachas of tumas are mefurish in the Torah. Says he want to know, you're right, but in this we only need elikadashim and asheret. We need it for like the following halacha. Let's say a lentil-sized piece of one of the 8 crawling creatures that the Torah gives them a certain avhatuma, that their measurement is going to be time even a lentil. That's not mefurish in the Torah. The like siva, it's not written. Ketan like learn the brisa. Pasuk says in Vayikra, it says, these are what's tummy for you with all the shratzim. Whoever touches Bahem is going to become tummy until the evening. Now, if all we have is that pasuk, Yachabakul, and you would think that you have to touch the entire sheretz. But it says a pasuk elsewhere, it says, no, mayhem. It says, whatever's going to fall from them when they're dead, it's going to contaminate. So, okay, based on that passage, Yochel ben Mitzas, you would think it's enough to touch part of a dead sheretz, because it says mayhem from them. So, no, you have the passage that says in them, which is the whole them. Okay, so how do you resolve it? Is it bohem or mehem? So what the Chacham learn out is yeah, it's both. You have to touch part of the sheretz that's like the whole sheretz. What does that mean? That's where the Chacham evaluate that's the size of a lentil. Why? One of two pshatim. Either because shekin chaymet, which Rashi says it's a type of sheretz called a snail. A snail starts off the size of a lentil. So when you get a full-bodied snail, or any sheretz, when you take off a size of lentil, it's really mehem and bohem, because you could have a full snail that's the size of a lentil when it starts off that size. So a part that's like the whole, that's not so mafurish in the Torah. That's from a stira of bohem is what to rely on, but it's not mafurish. Or Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says the reason why they said it's the size of a lentil is because nav halta, like the tail of a lizard, which when you cut off the tail of a lizard, it's thrashes about after it's cut off. So it's really part of a creature that's like the whole creature, because it does have like its own life. So it's really mayhem, but it's bohem. So therefore, that's where we get the source of the size of a lentil. But again, that's not mafurish. That's what to rely on. Next category we spoke about was arayis, forbidden relationships. When we the Yom Kippur by Neil, we lay in the by Mincha. This arayis is tons of by Yikra, tons of psukim achrim ways. But all the forbidden relationships. What do you mean? It's what to rely on. It's mafurish psukim. So you're like this. No, you're right. You only need it as you timid bays for like a specific case. Lebitim anusase. That a man is forbidden to have intimate relations with the daughter of the woman that he raped. So like Siva, it's not written in the Torah. Now, because Rashi explains, his daughter from his wife, that is written by Yukri Yud Ches. It says Ervas Isho Bita. You're not allowed to have the erva of a woman and her daughter, which that sounds like whether the daughter is from him or whether she had that daughter from a different marriage, from a different man. So the wife's daughter, whatever the daughter's from, that we know. Now, there's another pasuk that says in Ebas Bas Ben Choy Bas Bitcha that you're not allowed to be intimate with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter. Now, the Gemara in Yevamis that Chagigah Daf tells us that's referring to which daughter? The daughter of the woman that he violated. Now, the reason is from the fact that the pasuk didn't say that the daughter of his daughter that he has from his wife, it just says his daughter, his son's daughter, or his daughter's daughter. What do I mean? Why doesn't it say his wife's daughter's daughter or his wife's son's daughter? Because it's talking about the daughter of the daughter that was born from him, but not from a woman that he was married to. So that pasuk by Anusa, by the woman that he violated, the only thing we see is a prohibition of the woman that he raped, daughter's daughter or son's daughter. But it doesn't tell us about that woman's daughter. Now, Rashi says, isn't that a Kabul Chaimer? If you're telling me that the Anusa's granddaughter is forbidden to him, like his granddaughter, so wouldn't the daughter be forbidden? So Rashi says, yes, but what's called Emas Hirin Adin, and Ein Einshim Adin Kabul Chaimer. We don't make prohibitions, and neither do we give punishments based on Kabul Chaimer. Now, Rashi says, regarding monetary law and positive commandments, nalachas of avodah and psula kachim, that you can learn from a Kabul Chaimer. But regarding azharas and einshin, the Gemara tells us in Makkas Daf Heyman Beis that no, we cannot learn out min adin. So the question is, how do you know bitum anasase is forbidden? That's not mafurish in the Torah, but there is what to rely on. That's what we're saying by Rais Mashas Mech. Because the Amar Rabba says, the Amali Rabbi Yitzchak Abdimi says, Asya Hena Hena. We have Xer Shaba of the word Hena to tell us the prohibition, and Asa Zima Zima, we have Xer Shaba of the word Zima for the punishment, because every prohibition in Torah has to have the source for the prohibition, what we call Asar, has to have also the source for the punishment. So by marriage, the Torah tells us Sha'ara Hena Zimahi, that she's a relative of yours, and therefore that's considered zima. It's immoral to have relations with such a person. Now, by the Einzin, it says Kirvascha Hena, because it's your erva. And again, it used the word Hena. So just like the Hena it says by the woman that you married, the Torah makes that her daughter is like her daughter's daughter and like her son's daughter. So by Einzin, the pasuk is making that his daughter is like his daughter's daughter and like his son's daughter, from the Gezeish of Hena. We compare just like by a married wife, that the daughter is like the granddaughter. So too, because then we know Isha Bita, so too by the Anusa, though it doesn't say Mefurish, From Heina Heina, we learn that from next Shava that the daughter is like the granddaughter. Now, so too we learn that Zima Zima for the punishment of Streifa, that from the fact that you're comparing the Anusa to a married woman that he's married to. Now, but the married woman says Zimahi, like we quoted the pasuk before. It said that She'era Heina Zimahi. So it's like as if it was written by the Anusa also, from that Gezeir Shabbat that compares the two of them, as if it says Zima by the Anusa. Oh, now you can learn that it has a punishment of Streifa from a different pasuk, a Chav. From Isha She'ikach as Isha Ves Ima. If a man's going to take a woman and her mother, it says Zimahi, that's Zima. Be'esh Yisrael, they can be burnt in the fire. Oisa Vesen, him and them. So from the combination of Heina Heina, which tells us that the Anusa is like the Nesua, that just like a married woman, her daughter is forbidden, just like her granddaughter is forbidden, because you're married to the woman. So too we know Anusa, that the daughter is going to be like the granddaughter. That tells us the Azhara, the prohibition. The Einish then is now that we know that the Anusa is like the Nesua. And by Nesua it said the word Zima. So it's like as if it said the word Zima by the Anusa, and just like it says the word Zima there, and it says the word Zima by a woman and her mother, that's forbidden to marry the woman and her mother. And the other punishment is Sreifa. So over here it says Zima, Zima is Sreifa. And again, that's what we mean to say that it's not Mefudish for Arayas, specifically Anusa, Bitam Anusasim. And the Mishnah ended up and said, Heinin Gufei Torah. In this last category, these are the primary texts of the Torah. So the Gemara says, Hani, the ones that are explicit in their Gufei Torah, they're the principles of the Torah. Hanach, all the rest that are not so explicit, Loi, they're not Gufei Torah? What does that mean? So let me rather say the Gemara, no, what we mean to say is, Hein Vehem. This was going on all of them. These and those are Gufei Torah, whether they're Mefudish, whether they're not, they're all the primary principles of the Torah. We shall return to the first parak in Masechet Chagigah, parak Chagigah, which, like the opening words of the parak of the Masechta, everyone's obligated in the mitzvah of Re'iyah, which is the topic of this Masechta, and we spoke about the halachas of Chagigah and regarding the necessary purifications. And now we continue with the second parak Ein Darshan, which continues really on the related theme of the last Mishnah. In the last Mishnah we mentioned Arayas regarding the halachas of Arayas, the sourcing of it. So we continue on the drasha of Arayas, like we said, bitim anasase. We're actually going to mention that we only know that through a drasha. So related to that idea, we're going to speak about that Ein Darshan ba'Arayas. You cannot expound the topic of Arayas unless it's you cannot expound it b'shleisha. So what does three mean? So the Gemara initially assumes that three means the Malamed, the Magid Shir, and two other people. That no, for Arayas, you cannot expound with a Chabura of three people. And V'leva Maisa B'Reishis, neither can you expound the Maisa B'Reishis, which Rabbeinu Tam brings. It's the 42-letter name of God that comes out from the word, from B'Reishis and the Pasuk after that, which if you understand the ways of Kabbalah, you'll know there's a 42-letter name of God over there. That's Maisa B'Reishis, that's the God's heavenly act of creation. You cannot expound that, B'Shnayim, with two people, which again, initially the Gemara assumes that to mean a person and someone else. And V'lebim Merkava, and you cannot expound what's called Maisim Merkava, the heavenly chariot, which was a prophetic vision of God's glory. You cannot expound that b'yachid, meaning, even if it's just yourself, you cannot expound it, because obviously yachid means the person himself. Unless he's a sage and he understands things on his own. Okay, continues the Mishnah. A related discussion. Whoever gazes at the following four things that we're going to mention, it would be have fit for him as if he didn't come to the world. What are these four things? So one is mala, what's above the sky, meaning above the heads of the chayis. The chayis are these heavenly angelic creatures that are the highest of what is above this whole world. So a person wants to know what's above them, or malamata, which two interpretations. Either lamata means to say what's beneath them, the chayis, or actually malamata means to say, like Rashi says in Ein Yaakov, what's beneath the earth, like what's above us in the sky and what's beneath us, beneath our earth. And malafanim, what's from before, which one interpretation in Rashi, that means what's beyond our galaxy to the east. And mala'achar means to say what's beyond us to the west. Or Rashi brings from the Tosefta that malafanim means what was before the world. And mala'achar means to say what's going to be after the world. if whoever looks at these 4 things is fit, that he would not have come to the world. And also, whoever is not concerned about the honor of his creator, which you must explain what that is talking about, also, which Rashi says the word Rasa means like it would have been better had he not come to the world. So the Gemara has a question. One of the things we said was the Maisim Merkava. You said that you said you should not expound the heavenly chariot with an individual. Now, since he's an individual and he's not hearing this from any teacher, obviously he understands this on his own. Because no, you can't learn Ma'aser Merkava if you don't understand it. And you tell him that he cannot do this, even b'yachid. Then you go and you say, unless he was a sage and he understands things on his own. Obviously he's understanding his own. He's learning by himself. So what does that mean? You can't do it by yourself. So the Gemara says, Hachikama. You're right, the Gemara amends this whole teaching and says, when we said Ein Darshan Ba'arayis, it wasn't Bishleisha. It says you cannot expound the Parasha Ba'arayis Lishleisha. 2-3 people. Meaning besides for the Baal Darshan, besides for the Maggid Shir. Not with 3 people, which we thought meant him and 2 people. No, it means him and 3 people. And you cannot expound the Ma'aser Bereshis, the acts of creation, to 2 people. So it's him and 2 people. And for sure he cannot expound it to 3 people. And you cannot expound the Ma'aser Merkava to an individual, meaning to 1 Talmud. Unless he was a sage and understood things on his own, that he shouldn't have to ask the teacher when he doesn't know about something, because these are not things that are appropriate to say straight out. Certain things, you either get it or you don't, and therefore he shouldn't even teach it to an individual unless that individual versteht. Then you can teach it to him. So it answers the question. It's not with 1 person, it's to 1 person. And that's how we amend the whole opening it, all these cases of the Mishnah. Now that we understand actually that it means 2-3 people, and 2 people, and 1 person, so now the Gemara explains it. We said in the Mishnah, in Darshan Ba'arayis B'shleisha, we don't expound the Parasha Ba'arayis with 3 people, which meant to 3 people. So Gemara, my time, what's the reason? If it's because the pasuk says the Yikra ish al kol she'er b'sari, every man to any relative that he has, that's the halacha of Arayis, that leisikrivu legalos ever should not have Arayis. Now, that's the simple understanding. But the Gemara says maybe we're saying a drush like this: ish is 3, a man is 2. She'er b'sari, a relative of his, that's chad, that's another person, that's 3. And if you read the pasuk in this interesting way, it's saying leisikrivu, don't come close, legalos erva, to reveal the Arayis, meaning the 3 of you don't come together to reveal the understanding of the Pasha Arayis. So the simple understanding of the pasuk is every man should not come close to his relative to reveal nakedness and be intimate, whatever. No, read it. Ish, man, 2. Leisikrivu, don't come close to a 3rd person. Legala zerva, to be megala the Pasha Arayis. So you see, 3 people cannot be learning the Parasha Barayis together. So you say, "Oh, Matt, if that's the case, then what do you do with the pasuk in Yikra?" It says, "Ish ki yikal lekav." A man who's going to curse his God. Well, let's say ish ashyitim mizar lamelech. A man that's going to give from his children to melech. But hachanami, here you can tell me it's also chayiv if it's 1 person. It's only if 2 people do melech, 2 people are mekal lekav. Ella hanami baile. Rather no. So why I say the word ish a 2nd time? You need a Rabbi Sanachim to include the Gentiles, that they're included in blasphemy against God, and that they're for one regarding idolatry like Melech. Kisrael, just like a Jew. So then here also when we're talking about Parsha Begila Arayis, is Rabbi Sanachim, it's to include Gentiles. Just to say that they're warned regarding Arayis, so don't tell me ish is 1, 2, 3 that they can't be Begala ever. No, it's just coming to include a Nachri that he also has the same halacha. So okay, I'll tell you the source of Indash Ba'arayis B'shleish is from a different pasuk. And the Chsiba says in Vayikra, Ushmartim is Mishmartim. You should safeguard my safeguard. Now, Ushmartim is plural. That's 3, that's 2 people. Mishmarti, that's singular, that's chad, that's 1, that's 3. And V'amach, what does the Torah say? Levilti asois mechukes ha'te'eves, not to do from these abominable practices, which refers to Arayis. Oh, so you see, don't handle the sugya of Arayis with 3 people. I said, wait a second. If that's the case, the Chsiba says in Shemais, you should safeguard the Shabbos. And you should safeguard the mitzvahs. Or you should safeguard the holy sacred. Well, Shabbos, you only have to keep it 2 people. It says in the plural. So Rashi has a different source. He says, "Ma'in doishin b'arais b'shleisha." What does it mean? Don't expound the rais by 3 people. It means in doishin b'sisri arais b'shleisha. Don't expound the parsha of arais that is concealed, that's not explicit, which we have in the top of this amid. For example, bitim al-nasasai, his daughter from the woman he violated, or regarding his father-in-law's mother or his mother-in-law's mother, which the Gemara in Sanhedrin of Ein Hayim and Alf learns out from Drasha. If it's not explicit in the Torah and you're learning it from Drashas, that's the parsha arais you should not expound with 3 people. My time, what's the reason? You're not bringing me any psukim like the Gemara tried before. What would be the reason? Says he wants to follow it's based on logic. Because Beitrei, when you have 2 people, Kiyasi Kamidabai, when they're sitting in front of their teacher, so Chad Shokol Tari Bahadir Habe, so one person is going to ask in the middle of the shir and he's going to handle with the Rebbe, how do we understand this? V'idach, what does the other guy do? Matzli Udne Gemara. He listens, he pays attention to what's going on to the conversation. Because he's sitting there, what's he going to do? But Kolosser, the problem is when you have 3 students, Chad Shokol Tari Bahadir Habe. So one guy gets up and he asks a kasha, bomba kasha. And he's handling with the Rebbe and they're going back and forth. What did these 2 other guys do? So they're handling, they start handling. You hear in the middle of the shit, these 2 guys are schmoozing and they're handling, and there's one guy's asking you with the Magid Shir. They're not going to know now what the Rebbe said because they're handling with themselves. And they're going to come to permit something that's prohibited regarding our rights because they didn't hear what the Rav said when he was given the drasha. He says, "Oh, Yankele, you're asking a Gevaldik. Let me tell you this exactly what this means." And Bitum and Asasa is Taka Aser. And these 2 guys, Chaim and Shmuel, they're middle discussing. They didn't hear that. That's why you can't give a drasha in Sisri Adayis, which is not explicit in the Torah, to 3 people. Because you're going to be talking to one. These 2 guys are not going to hear. So he must say, if that's the case, then call it Torah Nami. What does it have to do with Parsha Adayis? The whole Torah. It told Shabbos. These 2 guys didn't hear that we said that you can't clap on Shabbos. Just pick that, why not? Or you have to wear a gargle by davening. But the point is that they're not going to know that. So no. Arayis is Shani. Arayis is different. Why? Because the Amamar, the master says, it's a Mishnah, the last Mishnah, Mesechta Maked of Chagigah Beis, Gezel v'Arayis, when it comes to robbery and to illicit relationships, Nafshe mechamdosan, the person's soul desires them, and he lusts for them. So regular halacha, we're not so concerned that you're not going to know. But when it comes to Arayis, then we're concerned that if you're not going to hear it, then you're going to stumble at it. So you must say, well, if that's the case, it's Gezel Nami. So we should also say that you cannot be Derish Begezel B'Shleisha, because those 2 other guys didn't hear that you're not allowed to cheat out your competitor, or that you can't do something regarding the halachas of Gezel, because that's also something that people want to, their soul is pushing them. So no, Arai is very different. That's Bein B'Fanav, Bein Shalei B'Fanav. Regarding illicit relationships, regarding Shmiras Anayim, Shmiras Abris, that's whether in front or not in front. Nafa Shitzrei. A person's taiva is always there, whether he's in front of the woman or not in front of the woman. Gezel, on the other hand, robbery, the fun of when he sees in front of him an ability to steal, he sees, look at this. This is a great opportunity for me to, weasel some few million over here. Nafa Shitzrei. Then he has this push. A person doesn't think, who could I steal from today, right? But Arayis is there at all times, and therefore that's why something we're more concerned, and that's why I said Ein Doishin B'Arayis B'Shleisha Pasha, because the 2 guys are going to be schmoozing when the Rav is speaking with the Magid with the Talmud, and they're not going to hear that. Now we said then the next category is V'Leiv Ma'aser B'Reishis B'Shnayim. Said that you can't give a drasha in Ma'aser B'Reishis to 2 people. Where do we know this? That 2 people cannot be asking the Magid Shir, the Rav, Ma'aser B'Reishis at the same time. So it's not about like we learned the Brisa. Pas says in Devarim, when you're going to ask about the earlier days, which is Ma'aser B'Reishis, the act of creation, so Sha'al is in the singular. It tells a Yochid Sha'al, an individual can ask. You can't have 2 people coming at the same time to ask this topic. It has to be to 1 person at a time. Now, Yochid Yishal, you would think that a person could ask what was Kodesh Never before the world was created, which that relates to the other halacha of our Mishnah that we spoke about, what was. So it says in the pasuk over there, no, if you're going to ask for the earlier days, the day that God created man on the earth. Now, actually, based on that, you would think a person cannot ask about what happened in the 6 days of creation, because it's saying from the day that man was created on earth. And we know that Adam Rishon was created on today, on Friday, on Erev Shabbos. So you would think that you can't ask about what happened before that on Sheish Mebreshus. No, it says for the earlier days that was before you, which is already from day one of creation. So you see that a person could ask, just not before the world was created, but he could ask from day one of creation. Now, Yachal, Yishal Adam, you would think a person could ask, Malamalo, Malamata, Malafonim, Malach, which already explain different ways, what's above, what's beneath, what's before, what's after. So no, the pasuk says that you're going to ask, from one end of the heaven to the other end of the heaven. Which is, you could ask regarding our galaxy. You could ask from one end of the heaven to the other end of the heaven. But you can't ask, well, what's beyond that? Well, what's beyond that? Well, what's before that? What's after that? Well, that's something that a person cannot ask. We don't have the capacity to understand it. And we weren't created with that ability. As we continue to Yebezim and Alf, so the Gemara has a question. It says, so now that you learn now from one end of the heaven to the other end of the heaven, that you're not allowed to ask what's beyond the parameters of our galaxy. So by default, we know that you're not allowed to ask what was before the world was created, because that's really the same thing. What was before the world was created is now beyond our boundaries of our world. So therefore the Gemara asks, from the day that God created man on the earth, Lamali, what do you need that to exclude from it before the world was created? You already know that from so says the Gemara, you're right, you need it for a different drasha. Remember, he says, Ad Marishan, the first man, he was from the earth, that's how tall, he was from the earth all the way to the sky. Shemai says in the pasuk, this is the pasuk we quoted, we need it for this drasha, from the day that God created man on the earth, and it says, which means say that he was on the earth, and he reached all the way to the end of the heaven. But, once he soured, and he sinned, God placed his hand, so to speak, on him, and he diminished him. Shemai says the pasuk in Tehillim, later and earlier you formed me, meaning, like Rashi explains, there was two formations of man. First he was very high, at the end he was very low, because Vatashas like Kapecha, you placed on me your palm, which again God diminished his height. Now, Amar B'Yehuda Merab, he says, Ad Marishan, the first man, is Seifa Oilmat Seifa Hayat. He is from one end of the world to the other end of the world. Like if he would lay down, his head would be in the east, and his leg would be in the west, like basically would take up the whole globe. That's how a tall Ad Marishan was. Like it says in the pasuk, from the day that God created man on the earth, from one end of heaven to the other end of the heaven. Now, once he soured, so then so God placed his hand on him and he diminished him. Like it says, that you placed on me your palm. So says the Gemara, if that's the case, kasha kral dadi. What do you mean? Then we have a contradiction, because you said that he's from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, which is the same distance from heaven. Heaven is over earth. One end of heaven to the other end of heaven. That's how tall he was. And then you tell me he was the same. He was the height of was he the horizontal or the vertical? So the Gemara, it's not difficult. They're all the same measurement. That's how tall he was. Which Tosfos says that's a distance of 500 years. Tosfos brings an interesting remez, because it says God's name is Shakai. What's Shakai? That it should not expand anymore. Like it says, I said that it's enough for the world. Now, that's what the Gemara says elsewhere. Now, Tosfos says, where you see that it was 500 years and not more, not less, that's the distance from heaven to earth, or from one end of heaven to the other. So it says an interesting remez. It says, learn from the word Shakai. Sha, and then Dai is, in Shakai, there's three letters. Shin, Dalet, and Yud. If you take the hidden letters of those three letters, we know that the Shin, we only see the first letter. Shin is Shin Yud Nun. Dalet is Dalet Lamed Sof. And Yud is Yud Vav Dalet. If you take the hidden letters of Yud Nun, Lamed Sof of the Dalet, and the Vav Dalet of the Yud, that's hidden from Shakai, comes to a numerical value of Tuf Kov of 500. That's it, said he heard from Menachem ben Israel. That alludes to that's the distance of 500 years is from heaven to earth, and from one end of heaven to heaven. And that's how tall Ad Marishan was. Thank you, Dr. for hosting us.